All right, 2001 Volkswagen Jetta. Here's the problem. What is that, you ask? Why, it's the inner joint on the inner tie rod, which looks a lot like this. So we're going to be changing this. This is the inner part of the joint, and this is the outer part of the tie rod. What's happening is in here, it's loose. The ball socket has gotten loose in there, so it is making this. So I'll show you how to get all that out and how to change it. So start with taking off the wheel. Loosened this 19mm tie rod bolt, and we're gonna leave it on the threads though, because we gotta break the taper on this joint. Like that. So the nut helps protect it in case you miss and hit it. You don't hit the threads, you just hit the nut. And who cares? The nut doesn't care. And you just unthread it, and voila, you have your tie rod end out. So next up, we're going to get this joint loose, which you need to turn the light the other way, like that. All right, so this joint, this is just a squeeze clamp. Cut them, just cut them, because we'll put something else on there. Cut that one off, and then the inner one is a little bit more interesting. For that, I have this other trick. All right, so here we got that inner one, which I usually just take a screwdriver, try and get it poked in there if I can. I might have to move the camera though, because it's hard to get the right angle with the camera there. There we go. As you can see, I just broke it loose, because all this is held on by is these little clips, and those little openings attach onto here. So if you just knock this thing off, it'll break loose. And so now we can take this, pull this boot back, as best we can. Come on. There we go. Oh. And now we've exposed. There's the inner joint that we got to get to. And this is where you can really get a good look at the looseness. That shouldn't be happening. It shouldn't be this loose. So a little bit of looseness in there gives you a whole lot of looseness out of the wheel, as you remember from earlier. So yeah, now we just got to get to something to go around there. There are several options. You could just use an adjustable wrench, which is probably what I'll do. However, what I'm first going to do is extend it out as far as I can. So I actually already broke it loose. But what I used is this giant adjustable wrench, and just get on it wherever you can, and then crack it loose. It's not stupid tight, so it does come off pretty easily. As you can see, once you get it loose, it'll just spin off. Just unscrew it. There you go. Inner joint's out. See how loose it is? It shouldn't be doing that. All right, so now that you have them out, in order to, if you're trying to do this at home and you don't want to have to take it to get it, or you're going to have to drive it to get it aligned instead of getting it towed or something like that, because you don't want the toe too far off or you're really going to screw it up. I just take the two, line up the inner joint to where it's nice and even. Drop the cap, line that up, and then I'll just see where this, I'll mark this line where the lock nut goes, and then I'll also just eyeball mark where the tie rod should stop. roughly. Granted, we're not switching this over, we're using the one that came with it. So another thing you got to make sure of is, one, these are the same. Yeah, they look the same. So that means we'd put this back on to about there. I don't have to be super precise. You can be as precise as you want to be depending on what you're doing. I'm going to align this thing when I'm done because we have the equipment. So but if you wanted to try and do it without that, yes, you could do that, and then you could also gun sight the wheels and see that they look like they're pretty straight, and that usually works pretty well. It'll at least make it to where you can get to the alignment shop, and then they can touch it up and make it perfect. So I'm going to get these all transferred over. It's just a matter of holding this down and breaking that loose, taking the boot off of one, putting it on the other. I just got to get this boot from here over to here. So, and then jam that thing all the way up there. Of course, you might need to remark it after you do this. So just be mindful of all that good stuff. Any questions, comments, concerns? Feel free to leave a comment down below. That would be fine. So there's the inner joint. I will try to answer whatever I can. Might have to put this in a bench vise or something. Golly. Yeah, it's a bit tight. I'm gonna go bench vise it and get it out. Honestly, it's best to do all that before you even start, like to break these loose. But I just used the bench vise and got it out. So we got to change the boot over. That's the main thing here. Ooh, too far. Right there. Cool. Which you can do that, and then you can get it stuck on the boot. Either way. Anyway, so we'll probably just chop that part out. Get the threads off. Of course, make sure the threads are the same. Yes, they are. And on we go. So I'll put the end back on this. And I can still see my mark right there. So I'll thread this in. We can see how good my quick eyeballing does when we go to align it. I'll show you all the alignment results right when we get it hooked up. All right, now we just put it back in. Wow, I didn't need that head. Ow. Do I recommend changing both sides, or you don't have to. It's not the worst idea. If maybe you got this side's loose and the other side is just as old and, you know, possibly wearing out, then it wouldn't be the worst idea to give it a shot. You just crank it down, don't go too crazy on it. Just make sure it's tight. Not a whole lot of room under here. This big apple. There. Alright, so one little trick here to get the boot over the inner joint is I turned the other wheel. So it pulled this, as you can see, this is way further in than it was. So the boot's over the inner joint and this joint. I'm just gonna get screw clamps because these don't spin, there's no balance to them. You just gotta make sure this boot doesn't move. So a screw clamp will work just fine. All right, so I got a hose clamp here. And so I just set it down under there, and then I find a good access to get to that. which is usually somewhere around here. To get that tied, I'm gonna get the other one around this one, which I'll just take it apart and then put it around this thing here. Even though I already got this, you could already just do it with this off, and that would be fine too. If you had good planning, you would just take this little one and get it on there before you put the end on, but I didn't do that. So I'll save you the effort and the time of staring at this part, and we'll meet you on the alignment rack. So be back shortly. I don't know who needs to hear this, but you can put these together and take them apart. So you just unscrew them and then jam it back in and screw it back together. So sometimes it might take a little extra pushing, but it is something you can do. See? So don't be afraid to take these apart so you can get them around something and then put them back together. It's just unscrew it all the way, like that, bend it around whatever you need to bend it, and then the only trick is making sure you have enough slack that you can actually get it back in there to get it started again. So that's all. Figured somebody could use that. All right, last thing before we get over to the alignment rack. When you're getting these nuts up, these are usually lock nuts. They either have some sort of rubber gasket or they have a cotter pin. If you need to hold the shaft still, most of the time they come with some sort of, you know, socket that'll fit either an Allen, a triple square, a Torx, even just a hex off of here that you can put a wrench on. Something to hold the shaft still while you screw up the nut, because this will make the whole shaft spin. And sometimes the nuts or the joint's tight enough that you can just spin it up anyway. So there you go. Just make sure you have a little tool to hold these. So here's what we got. Toe's a little off in the front. Camber's a little off there. Not a whole lot I can do about that. There's no adjustment for it. Same thing with the rear toe here. It's a solid rear toe torsion bar. There's no adjustment for that toe. There is some shims you could do, but that's a little extreme, especially because it's only off by 0.03. So it's kind of in that realm of eh. But we'll get this fixed, and we weren't too far off either. It's a little out, but it's 0.09 to negative 0.09 or 0.38, so we did pretty well. This is the spec that it would. This should even be a little bit further in the center. So we'll get all this adjusted and see how we do. So basically, I can't remember if I made an ending for the Jetta, but it drove fine. Everything went well. The only problem that it has now that I can find is this right rear shock is a little loose at the top end. So when you go over a bump, you'll hear a little banging, but the customer's not too worried about that right this minute. We'll get that fixed later, but we got the tie rod good. It doesn't shake when you're going down the road. Everything is mwah. So thank you very much for watching this episode, and I appreciate you doing so. If you liked it, leave a thumbs up, etc., etc., and see you all in the next one.